Rave to the Grave.
Welcome to Rave to the Grave. My guest today is Ms. Easy. She's an amazing dancer and performer whose resume includes everything from choreography, circus arts, burlesque, makeup, costuming, to managing a whole lot of clowns at once. Easy came of age in St. Louis, Missouri, cutting her teeth with the legendary rave crew Superstars of Love. Then she moved to New Orleans, where she cultivated her performance chops and her wild side. Her love of bass music took her to Denver, where she worked at Beta nightclub and launched her own entertainment company called Team Easy. And eventually, all of these years of figuring out every part of the rave that's not booking the DJs culminated in her current position, entertainment director for Insomniac Productions. Easy manages the over 500 performers at Insomniac's music festivals like Beyond Wonderland, Nocturnal Wonderland, Electric Mile, and Electric Daisy Carnival, one of the biggest raves in the world, which draws over 400,000 people. For years and years, I've seen Easy dancing on the stage at raves and backstage running the show. She's an electric personality, and I always wanted to know more about her. Welcome to Rave to the Grave. Easy, welcome to Rave to the Grave.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, man, there's so much I want to ask you. I don't even know where to start first, but I guess let me start at what is the first ever time you heard electronic music or you went to a club? Let's start with when did you first hear electronic music?
Wow. Well, I'd say for a lot of us, first hearing electronic music was probably something like Pump Up the Jam on the radio, right? It was just kind of creeping into the peripheral for us as we were all growing up. And I guess it was just a matter of time before all of us ended up at a rave somehow. And it was more of the underground rave scene and less of the clubs at the time, because I think clubs were really focusing on hip hop. But it was a thing that we all kind of just happened upon, I'd say. My first time hearing electronic music that wasn't more radio driven was probably at the first rave that I ever went to. And it was a surprising thing to hear it in that form versus, the pop electronic music that we were hearing at the time.
I imagine that as a little kid, you were kind of like you are now, where you're always dancing and putting on a performance. Is that real? Do I have that right?
100%. Yeah, listening to my mom talk about that is hilarious, I guess. They can look back and definitely see that I was on a trajectory to where I am now. My earliest memories are definitely dancing, posing for pictures, dressing up in costumes in the house, putting on little shows for my family, whether they be dance or puppetry or whatever I was doing in the house at the time.
Tell me a little bit about where you grew up.
So I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. And I would say it's not the most creative place on the planet, but there are a lot of creators there. It was always kind of on the fringe, I'd say, it being more of like a working class kind of Midwest vibe. You're not super encouraged to think outside of the box or be expressive. So it was very interesting being a child like that and growing up in an environment that was kind of telling you the whole time that that wasn't normal or that you maybe shouldn't be like that because that's not the path to success. I was an only child. My mom had a brother way later in life. So I pretty much grew up alone, but I was a little bit of a loner. I didn't really seem to relate to a lot of the things that kids were into at the time. I liked music that was dated a lot of the time, or things that weren't super mainstream. I was attracted to, artistic things and definitely performance-based things. And that didn't really seem like it was what was cool around where I grew up. So.
Oh, yeah. I think I was reading an interview with you where you said you were watching Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire as a kid.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, my grandparents turned me on to what's kind of like the golden age of performance. I feel like music and dance used to be such a big part of entertainment. whether it be through like movies or theater or whatnot. It was embraced a lot more than by the era, where we were young people. I would say it was definitely shifting into something totally different, but I was lucky to be exposed to some of the classics and embrace that kind of vibe.
So tell me about your first rave. Where was it? How did you find out about it? Who was playing?
That's a really interesting story because I was taken to a rave by a friend. And we were kind of these like new wave kids that were, a mixture of like that and grunge and Riot Girl and all the things at the time that weren't electronic. And it was fascinating for me to kind of just end up at this place because it was really a place where the misfits went, and it wasn't a place where you went to belong. So I just randomly ended up there because of a friend. And I remember thinking, because I was, in that kind of punk rock mentality of like, I don't belong here, or, and then realizing that like every single person there was their own kind of person. Like it just, I can't really explain it more than saying it's the island of misfit toys back then, because that's what made you feel like you belonged at that time, right?
I actually said those exact words in a different episode of this podcast because that's how I like to describe it. Prior to going to raves, I was going to a lot of punk and I guess what would be indie shows, like Riot Girl shows, same thing. I mean, I loved the music, but I was very relieved that it was like dark and you could do whatever you wanted. You didn't have to watch a band because it was so stressful. I was always younger and I'm not cool enough. I don't belong. And like when you went to a rave, well, you could stand in like literally pitch black if you want. You could dance if you want. You could sit in the corner.
Yeah.
There was no like, you have to act this way.
There was a lot of freedom there for sure. I was spending a lot of time trying to make myself repulsive to the mainstream. Like I didn't want to fit in. I didn't want to be like the cool kids at school. So I was uglying myself up all the time. And I ended up at this place and that was the mindset that I was in. And people approached me in this pitch black room, as you're saying, and would tell me, and they didn't even have a face because I couldn't see who they were, but people coming up behind me and saying like, "You are beautiful," which was kind of mind blowing at that time and in that era, to be a person who's so much on the outside and then to feel that feeling for the first time from a stranger or with no expectation. So the question's really funny about who was playing at the rave, because I'm not sure any of us really knew who was playing back then. The DJs were kind of hidden. They weren't, you didn't really even know where the music was coming from necessarily. It was just people dancing in a big empty warehouse space. Not the focus on the DJ, not that definitely wasn't the goal of the party. So I actually have no idea who was playing at the first, handful of parties that I went to. It wasn't until later that I started realizing like who the DJs were, or, they started showing their faces more.
There was definitely a turning point where it was more like you could recognize the DJs as different personalities. Because for a while, everybody was kind of just almost in the same clothes and like nobody was on a stage. So you were like, I don't know,
Right.
It's a person in a sweatshirt. Like in big pants.
Way off in the corner of the room, or, up high in a little skybox somehow in a different place. You often didn't know where to look, where the music would be coming from at all. So in a sense, that I really like that vibe, because your focus was taken off of just, as you said, being at a concert, being at a punk show, and you're specifically focused on the band or that one thing. And instead we got to have this kind of immersive experience of what was going on around us. And it was a really creative time where promoters were putting a lot into the events, where you might just have one blinking strobe light in the corner and that's it for your light show. But there would be like paper mache moons hanging from the ceiling and tire swings and, a bunch of broken televisions with static in them in a big pyramid. And that was the real beauty of the event. And that's what drew me in. The music obviously really grew on me and became a big part of everything. But the culture, the vibe, and the artistic expression that was happening inside of those events really kept me there.
How long of going to parties was it before you were like, okay, wait, I'm really into this?
It happened pretty quickly, actually. I think, like I was saying, that feeling of true acceptance and no judgment made me realize it was a place that I wanted to be. And seeing all different kinds of people being so free and all ages, whether you were gay, straight, it didn't matter what your background was, where you came from. I'd never witnessed that in society at the time, especially, like I said, being in a conservative place like the Bible Belt of America. It really was a place I knew I wanted to be. And my life changed. I would say after going to the first rave I ever went to, my life changed.
When I used to go to the Midwest, like in the 90s, like everyone would be driving so far. Not that we didn't drive in California, but I would play like in Wisconsin and someone would have driven like all the way from Chicago or some other place that's like 8 hours away, like just to come to the party. Is that what you started doing?
Oh, yeah. Everywhere from New York down to New Orleans, Wisconsin down to Florida. I mean, we would hit everything from Milwaukee to Orlando. And we would be in one city one night and in another city the next. And I actually joined up with this group in St. Louis at the time called Superstars of Love and became, a part of their company and a promoter for them. So I had reasons to be in a different city every single night promoting our parties at the time. And I would say I was pretty much at every show. So people really got to know me.
So talk to me a little bit more about Superstars of Love. I know about it personally, but I never really get to hear about it. That's how you know Tommy Sunshine.
Yes, actually, that is when I met Tommy Sunshine. We were this really kind of out there creative squad of people who wanted to put on these shows that weren't anything like anything else that was happening at the time. So we really worked hard on the themes, the creative, like I said, the decor, just kind of like putting a theme, encouraging people to be in costume. It was a great era in the rave scene because I felt like there was no limit. And so much hadn't been done at the time that everything was new, So I feel really lucky. I don't know how many raves I went to before I ended up kind of on this team, but it wasn't that many actually. I just feel like I was at the right place at the right time, met the right people, but I somehow got scooped up by them as a creative person and we were off, every city. And then our shows were really amazing. St. Louis is a small city, but I would say that we had some of the most memorable events for sure. And we would see people coming from Florida, hey, I drove all the way here from Miami, Orlando, Atlanta, whatever it was, just to be at this event in St. Louis, Missouri. I think that was a really beautiful thing because the scene was small and it kind of took people traveling for us to have events of the size that we did back then.
What are some of the most memorable events or most memorable themes that you guys did with Superstars of Love?
Oh, I would say the most memorable event for Superstars was Love Generator. And that event, it's almost something out of like a movie, when I replay it in my mind, we were really in the club kid phase. So we were in these crazy costumes and I was working the door at this event in a broken down warehouse. That was surely a death trap. And there were people from all over the country that had driven there, standing in this, hours long line, coming up like a broken staircase inside of a fire escape stairwell to get through the door where we were. And it got so crowded and so crazy that we actually got shut down. We got raided. And it was at the time when the police were really coming in and taking the promoters to jail and throwing everybody in jail. And I narrowly escaped going to jail that night. So I remember when David, who is David Alter from Superstars of Love, was being hauled off to jail. It was just kind of one of those moments where I felt like we were like these, rebels, these like rave renegades that we were like fighting for our right to be different, to be the weirdos. It's a really inspirational kind of memory for me. And then the very next weekend, I did get arrested at a party that I was working at in Memphis. I went to jail the very next weekend instead. And it's pretty sad when you get hauled off to jail in your rave costume because they kind of strip you of all of the things. So, you're like emptying your pockets out and you're like, oh, glow sticks or whatever it was at the time. But it was a pretty hilarious scene, to say the least.
Okay, if you could have an outfit back from those days, which one would you have back?
Wow. Okay. Well, I used to make a lot of my own costumes, which is actually how I became a designer and a costume maker. It was from this era of realizing that what's in your mind doesn't exist and you have to make it yourself, which was really cool. Everyone at the rave had their own personalized costume. But I would say I had like a pink kind of manic panic hair at the time. And I had this like grandma knitted neon sweater. So it was like neon pink and yellow and black and red striped with a complete plastic outfit that I had built that like was layered into it with my stacks that were probably a foot tall. We wore those giant stacked tennis shoes and everything was like neon and plastic and see-through. I think I had some like X-Girl mixed in there and some other old school brands, but it was just like a crazy montage of like almost like a neon pink presence. And that was probably the one that's the most memorable that if I was actually just thinking about that probably a day ago, like if I could just get some of those pieces back to keep the memory from. But over the years, all of the clothes or costume pieces have all, gone on their way or been stolen or ruined or whatever's happened.
There was definitely a cool like moment of time, I think, before there was rave fashions that you could buy that were like readily available where people had to make everything themselves or cobble it together from the thrift store. And those are sort of the outfits that I find the most memorable were from those days because everybody was really expressing their personality with like what they managed to literally glue together or like sew.
Oh yeah, definitely. Original rave fashion, really, you put it correctly. It was all coming from the thrift store. So it was like, how can I cut this piece up and sew it to something else and turn it into this thing? And then I would say that as times changed, we saw like Genko and other brands coming in that started to make actual rave fashion. But before that, it was like golf pants and old Adidas jumpsuits that were abandoned at the thrift store, right?
Yeah, I miss those days. The thrift store isn't as good as it used to be for sure.
Yeah, they figured out that it was cool.
Yeah, exactly. So where does the like dancing come into this? I mean, clearly you were dancing as a kid. I'm sure you were dancing at the rave, but at what point did it start to become like, okay, maybe this is something I can do more professionally?
I would say that it was a thing that just kind of happened in the scheme of things, like what we're saying, being involved in the production side of events, even when we didn't realize that's what we were doing at the time. We were just following our hearts and trying to create something really cool for everyone. As I said, it was a super inclusive environment and a lot of drag queens were performing on our stages back then, and club kids and these types of artists. And so I was often being pulled on stage by these personalities saying like, you should be up here. You should be up here. And yeah, I was definitely a dancer. I was born dancing for sure. So it just came naturally to be kind of in the mix of things. And as time went on, I realized I was having a lot more fun putting together the performance art pieces or coordinating the drag queens than I was promoting the show or thinking about throwing a rave. So it's a thing that I just gradually moved into because people kind of kept putting the spot on me. It wasn't a thing I chose. It chose me for sure.
When you look back at that time and all the parties that you went to, what was like one of the most legendary parties for you that wasn't one of your own?
Well, I remember being at Miss Lady Keir's party in Chicago, Submerged. And that was pretty legendary. I'm standing next to Miss Lady Keir and I get, this is her party. She's hosting it. And I would say being in Chicago during that era and being so close to, the heart of house music and how creative everybody was. And then, I'm lucky that I got to spend as much of my youth there and more or less how I grew up in the rave scene there as well, because St. Louis and Chicago were so intertwined in the scene. So I would say, man, so many amazing Chicago parties. But yeah, there was a really legendary party called Ladybug in Chicago that was also raided and kind of turned into a rave riot. So I'll never really forget that when the ravers rebelled when their party was shut down, or showing up at some of Disco Donnie's very first Zulus in New Orleans. You know, when they even began, and how amazing that was to be there, just to kind of always be where something was starting, and see its origins, and everything in its raw state back then.
Did you have any favorite DJs back in those days that were like, if they were playing, you really wanted to be there?
Oh yeah. I think, Richie Houghton will probably always be that legendary performer from the time. You had the Rabbit in the Moon and Josh Wink and the Hardkiss Brothers, the Wicked Crew. Yeah, I mean, what legends are really made of, in my opinion. For sure.
You have this one outfit that you perform in that's like a metal bikini and then sparks come out of the nipples. And I always think of Rabbit in the Moon when I see that, because Bunny from Rabbit in the Moon has a whole stage bit where he's got like chainsaws and sparks and metal flying.
And it's funny because then later on I was doing that in shows with him. And I actually started doing that when I was touring with this band called the Genitorturers, which is an industrial rock band. And I was doing live performance with them on stage. And that was one of the things that, someone handed me an angle grinder and was like, here, go for it. So I kind of just got thrown in that whole thing as well, which is something that ended up becoming a big part of my performance later down the road. But at the time, Bunny was the only person I'd ever seen do it. And turns out he's actually really old friends with Jen and everyone from the Genitorturers as well. And it was a thing that they had kind of, I think, all started at the same time doing. So it came full circle for sure.
It's cool because I think about the first raves that I went to, and there was definitely a lot of industrial acts that were playing and people coming from the goth and industrial scene into raves as well, which kind of like died off after a while. But I think part of that aesthetic is still there sometimes. And it's like, It's cool to see you carrying on that little bit. It's like, if you know, you know.
It does feel like it's a big part of our roots. Back then, the scenes were really integrated, especially in certain cities. New Orleans was definitely like that. New Orleans has always had this kind of like dark aesthetic, a little bit of grime. And like you're saying, maybe the industrial scene creeped in a lot more into even the State Palace shows there. I remember the first time I saw Jekyll and Hyde play at the State Palace Theater with, dark breaks, but they looked like they had fully just walked out of an industrial goth club. And it wasn't weird. It was definitely like everyone belonged there. So for me, coming from some of that background as well, it'll always be a part of my style and my aesthetic. And I get to really express that during events like Escape for Insomniac. I'm able to create something for EDC that's like, rainbow themed, but at the same time at Escape, I get to really kind of bring out the dark characters. Or just this last year, actually, we started an area called Crazy Town that had its own little miniature venues in it. And I was able to book some industrial DJs for one of the venues. So in a sense, I brought industrial music to the rave and started a goth club inside of our rave, which for me was like, I want to talk about full circle. It was like a shining moment for me that I was able to do that. And then to be inside of a rave, go into our little venue, hearing full industrial music and watching ravers dance to it, and then seeing like the old school ravers in the room who are like, oh, I know what this is, and the drag queens in there dancing, and everyone having that good of a time, and more or less being able to bring like the fringe into the mainstream in a sense. It was really cool to see that happen.
So Escape, is that the Halloween party that Insomniac does? So it's like more of like a horror, like dark Halloween theme, right?
Right. More so. It's the one event that I would say takes a turn and does some of the darker styles of things for sure.
So cool. I mean, I think you have a great job for using all of the different pieces of your history and your background, like
Mhm.
whether that's in the costuming, whether that's the performers you choose, or the setups that you're able to program at these different
Mhm.
Insomniac parties. Before we get to talking about that, what drew you to New Orleans? Like, when did you move there? And kind of, that must have been a completely different vibe than St. Louis.
Yes and no. I would say that that whole side of the country was kind of on a vibe in a sense. And St. Louis is a very, even though it's Midwest, I would say everything from that area, like Chicago and down to New Orleans, you saw a lot of the same people at all the events, and with a lot of the same music was being booked. And I actually met Donnie at an event that I was helping put on. And he was talking about throwing an event in New Orleans that he wanted to call Zulu. And he asked us if we would come to it if he threw it. So we did. And that was really the beginning of me kind of hitting the road and ending up in a crazy place like New Orleans and falling in love with that city. And I was, going there throughout a certain period of time, and eventually it just stuck. Like I still to this day feel like my heart is there. I definitely left my heart in New Orleans, although I moved west, went on to some other things. A lot of things shut down after Katrina. The scene has really changed a lot in that city for sure.
Did you get into anything new when you moved to New Orleans? How did your kind of just landscape change when you went there?
I would say it almost feels like that's where I grew up. 'Cause it was the beginning of my adult life, I would say, where I felt like I was becoming the person I am now. So working with Donnie and doing the State Palace shows and performing there, and it definitely changed me by far. And I would say the city of New Orleans did, because people there are uninhibited. New Orleans is like the true Sin City. But it's a place where there are really no rules, and no one's telling you not to be sexy or to do those types of adult entertainment, whether it be anything from, being a burlesque dancer to, like we were saying, shocking performance art pieces that were happening kind of all over the city. Yeah, I would definitely say that that had a big influence on me.
Before we go on, I'm going to have you explain who Disco Donnie is for a younger generation of ravers who are not familiar.
The scene has grown so big that probably if you weren't around during an era to realize that, he was definitely the rave outlaw. And that's what he calls himself and what we all call him. He really kind of took the rave act head on and fought for us to have the right to still be here and doing what we do. And I think that's something that everyone should really know. And he's a very interesting person that is also full of self-expression. And I always loved watching Donnie show up in his costumes at his own events and sometimes even be a character. It was like Donnie's playing his own character at his own show. Yeah, we had so much fun together back then. Pretty much just being crazy all the time, just having so much fun at all the raves. And like I said, just no rules at all.
Yeah, it's very similar to the way that like Luke from Two Live Crew had to fight the censorship laws. It's like people like Donnie and Pasquale had to fight a lot in court to get the permissions and everything to actually be able to throw giant raves like we see them now, or giant festivals like electronic music festivals.
And they're still fighting for it every day. When you work behind the scenes and you realize what it actually takes and how much sacrifice and how much heart people are putting on the line to keep it going. It's pretty monumental, actually, and admirable to see people fight so hard for it. We went from worrying about the police finding out where our secret location was to now, having entire legal teams. And I don't think that most people know how much work goes into it or what it really takes and how big the teams are of people that are working on everything from the stages to, as you said, performers or any of the moving parts of the overall big machine.
Yeah, it's really interesting because for so long, if you're doing anything in electronic music, it was like you're the kid that never grew up, which is partially true, but you also have to know so much business and like be so skilled at certain things to like be able to do this job or be in this industry now.
Yeah, it's like all the rave kids grew up and they want to keep raving, but we had to swim really fast for sure. And Tommy and I laugh about that kind of stuff all the time.
I mean, what happened in your life after the crack house law and the rave started getting shut down? And what were the events that kind of took you to Denver, which is probably where I met you for the first time?
Well, at the time, this is before I had started an entertainment company. And it was still before things were really developed in the industry on the entertainment side. I was traveling around the country, so I was booking myself out as a solo performer and doing events all across the country. And I had passed through Denver many times doing events there and really loved it. I loved the people. I loved the city. I had this very strange intuition that it was time for me to leave New Orleans. And I did actually right before Katrina was when I moved to Denver. And I just kind of put one foot forward and went. I followed my heart, ended up there, and the rest is kind of history. When I got there, I met Brad Roulier, and he was doing everything at Club Vinyl at the time, and he went on to open Beta. It was kind of, again, another one of those instances in time where I happened to just meet people at a specific time before they jumped off onto the next big project, and I was there for it.
So when you say that you were booking yourself and traveling around as a solo performer, was that mostly at clubs and raves, or was it like all sorts of things that you were performing at?
It was all sorts of things. But yeah, I've always really had an affinity for the electronic scene and performing there. And honestly, as time went on, there were more and more bookings in this industry than there was, let's say, in the rock industry, the goth industrial industry. This industry really took off, and it was a place that offered a platform for me to be a performer. And I ended up doing that much more. Had the rock industry been able to build the same kind of platform, would I have gone that direction? I don't know. So yeah, but at the time, I was doing things, everything from, theater events to raves. Pretty much anything that came my way that I thought was suiting. I tried to really get my feet wet in every arena that I possibly could. It was a labor of love. It was a thing that I had to do because I didn't really see myself doing anything else. So even though I spent my years as a starving artist, for sure, all of that was kind of boot camp. It was definitely training for what I do now. And every single experience I had kind of gave me that background or experience, kind of culminate and put it all together to make the bigger picture of what we're doing now.
So one of the things that you did while you were in Denver and also performing at Beta was start your own go-go team or entertainment company called Team Easy.
I've always had a knack for organizing and managing and being in charge of things, I'd say. That's actually how I ended up starting my own company in the entertainment world, especially in the electronic realm of things. People were looking to me constantly as a leader or a person who could fix things or have the answers or make it all happen. So it was kind of natural for me to step up and assume that role and create a company because I saw that need in the industry. I really wanted to create a place for other performers to shine. I knew all along that we could be much stronger together and create something bigger together than me just being on my own. And as much as I love those years of being a solo performer, I think that now my fondest memories are probably creating a company and a culture within that company. I think it was natural, and it was something I always knew that I wanted to do, and not seeing it done very well back then. It was a time when things were really changing in the industry. The industry was really growing. My path and Pasquale's path crossed at that time as well. And here we are now creating something that's almost larger than life. And that's not being done anywhere else in the world.
Pasquale is the person who created Insomniac.
Yes.
Just for those who are not clear who we're talking about.
Yes. So yeah, the founder of Insomniac has a very big vision. He's a dreamer. He's a rave kid, all grown up. Same. He sees that in the rest of us dreamers, and we've all kind of jumped on the ark together and sailed away. I mean, I feel really blessed, if you want to use that word, that our paths all crossed when they did, and that our grander vision of things is coming together, where we're all like adding our piece of the pie and creating such an incredible experience.
Let's talk about what it involves to be the entertainment director of Insomniac. So a rave like EDC, around 400,000 people. It happens in Vegas on like a giant place. There's a bunch of stages. At a party like that, how many different groups of dancers or performers, quite literally, how many people are you booking and managing for something like that?
Well, let's see, EDC Vegas, which is our largest show, and it's the biggest one in the world that's really doing it on that level like that. I would say my department has around 500 people in it. So we're talking performers, but we're also talking our staff, whether it be our PAs, wardrobe, the hair and makeup teams. There are a lot of different departments inside of my department that I'm overseeing for sure. But for the performers themselves, there's probably about 50 teams on the ground in a day at EDC. We want to make sure that there are a lot of things happening in different places all around the event, so that no matter where you're at, you're probably close to something magical at any point in time.
Just like name off some of the costumed characters or like some of the themes of the different teams that somebody would see at EDC.
Well, at EDC, I mean, you may come across stilting fish, the Fishy Fish. You may come across the Technicolor marching band, which is all clowns playing instruments poorly. We have crazy LED acrobats that are, jumping off of walls and in tramp walls on the stages. You may come across the drag bar that we set up this year, the Queen bar, and see a live drag performance. Or you may be at the main stage, and it has its own entire team of specialty performers that are all in themed costumes that are programmed to the stage. As the stage changes through its worlds, the costumes change on the stage for the performers there. There are so many things that are happening at EDC at any point in time, and all of them are completely different concept and creation. It's really a culmination to me kind of picking Pasquale's brain. He has a lot of ideas of what he likes or how he wants it to be and things that inspire him. So we'll talk about things, and he'll give me kind of a path to set down on a different vibe or a different thing he wants to see. There are times I meet with even the people who design stages. So, if we have a certain brand inside of Insomniac, like let's say Dream State, which is the trance brand, they have a very specific aesthetic that they want for their brand. So, the performers that live inside that world or that realm are very customized to that style, that sound. How can we engage the audience wherever they're at the most, right? Stuff inspires me constantly. I'm inspired by everything around us, and definitely other scenes and music of all kinds and artists from the past and present. And I would say that I'm inspired by other designers and artists too in the realm. So I'll sit with them and pick their brains. They'll pitch ideas to me, or I'll pitch my ideas to them to have them collaborate or fabricate for me. It's a process that's really cool for us to constantly kind of be working off of one another.
When you were doing Team Easy or something, you were probably still kind of putting the outfits together yourself and finding all the pieces yourself and helping the girls do their makeup. And now you are doing that, but you have teams of people who can go sew. You could be like, I want this outfit, and somebody can go make it for you.
When I was doing my own company, I was definitely the person who wore all of the hats. And not that I never had help, but I was definitely doing so much. And I still wear a lot of hats and have my fingers in everything. I will still break out my sewing machines and sew things, or, any of the details that go into things. I can't help it. I'll always have that heart, I think.
What are some of the like funnier or weirder, not like dire deathly emergencies, but like performer emergencies that you've had to deal with at the last minute at these festivals? There's people walking on stilts, costumes breaking. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of things that could go awry.
There are definitely a lot of things that have gone awry, can go awry. Sometimes it's interesting interactions that are happening with headliners. Headliners being the people that come to the events. That's what we call them at Insomniac. So, getting that like call on the radio. We have someone that's, urinating on the leg of a stilter right now. What do we do? These are the kinds of calls that come across our radios. My answer is get away from that person. I mean, the list of weird things definitely is probably long. If you look in the crowd, you will see that many of the headliners are wearing a lot less than the performers. Honestly, even if you have silicone fake boobs on as an alien and they're airbrushed, you still have to put a pasty over the nipple. FYI, alien nipple is censored still. But we can't, let's say the photographs are circulating of the prosthetic nipple and, Insomniac itself can no longer use this photograph on their website or in an advertisement, or Twitch has censored us, or, pick any platform that's now deciding like it can't be a certain way or it needs to look a certain way. You'd be surprised how conservative it can get at times because there are so many people with different opinions on how it should be that are outside of our company even. So,
what are some of your absolute favorite themes that you've done over the years with Insomniac or costume characters? Or is there one group that is like close to your heart?
I would say that the clowns are very close to my heart. They're my babies, like my creation. And I am a clown. So that is a part of my performing character. And I would say that it will always be very close to my heart because I lived it so much. But outside of the clowns themselves, we have so many amazing different themes and groups. One of them was after the Pulse Orlando shooting, I wanted to do something in tribute to them. So I created a team of entertainers called Love Rules, and they're all rainbow colored, rainbow flags. And being able to see that come to life and putting it out, it debuted at EDC Orlando, and watching the response that, that group of entertainers got is really reminds me of like why I do it. And then, the challenge of kind of taking that inclusivity around the world into other cultures. I travel with Love Rules. I bring it pretty much to every country. And that has been a really interesting experience as well. Seeing the response around the world to something that started, in our heart after Pulse in Orlando. So I have a lot of an emotional investment in my work. And when I see the performers bringing them to life and I see them out there bringing so much joy to people on the grounds, as I said, it really reminds me of why I'm doing it.
So tell me a little bit about bringing Insomniac to other countries. Like I know that you guys recently went to China not that long ago, and I was wondering if you experienced any interesting reactions, because I don't think that they've had an electronic music festival of that production value and of that size, at least not in the way Insomniac does it in a country like that. And I know that you guys have been traveling around different places, kind of spearheading that in places where maybe that doesn't already exist.
Yeah, it's really interesting traveling around the world, like you said, doing it on that scale. But for me, what's really interesting is bringing entertainers. And entertainment wears a really different face around the world. It looks so different in every country. Sometimes it's completely non-existent. A country like China, most entertainment is circus-based. So if you aren't a contortionist or an aerialist, people really haven't seen you. And one of the things we focus on at Insomniac is immersive character acting. So although it's like theater, all of our entertainers have a dance background and are dancers, but they're also fully in character. And one of the things we like to do is make this a personal experience for the people who come to the shows. So there's a big chance you will have a one-on-one, more or less, with these entertainers up close. Well, in American culture, that is not considered unusual. But in a place like India or China, you can really see people's minds being blown on the spot as they witness something that is completely new to them. Um, and sometimes I see how reserved they are because it isn't a thing that's necessarily encouraged in their own society, especially if there are female entertainers that are being forward or are wearing, what is considered less clothing in their country. They don't expect a group of entertainers to approach them and engage them in song and dance or take photos with them or, have any sort of character conversations. They really don't see it coming. I often shadow performers now and coach, but I also just want to see people's reactions to them as a person that they don't know is watching. So, in a place like China, I can see when the performers move on to the next place, I will see the response of the group of people they have just interacted with and the literal excitement that they have, even if they were kind of like shocked and stone-faced when the performers approached them. We're kind of like expanding their minds or changing their perspective or showing them something they haven't seen before, a new way of being, thinking. Often, I've heard people say, thanks for letting me let my guard down, be myself more, be more expressive, dance, because they came up and danced with me. I wasn't as self-conscious about dancing in front of other people. It's really like a chance to let loose, have fun. And I would say that the entertainers, they're catalysts for that. They really do bring vibe to the event.
I feel like there's been a lot of emphasis on diversity and especially diversity racially and of body type, just like in advertising and fashion and media in the last, I would say 5 or 10 years. And I was wondering if this cultural emphasis on people being able to see themselves more in performers or in fashion models or in advertising or media has affected your industry at all?
I would say yes. I think that as society shifts and society norms shift, it definitely affects entertainment on a whole. And I think that's a really good thing. I love that I'm seeing people's mindsets change so that we can be even more inclusive and that's becoming acceptable to the people who are, promoters or clients, whatever you want to call them, that they are expanding their minds to ideas and changes. And I think that it's a thing that I have always embraced and really wanted to see happen. And I feel really excited about the future with the trajectory that we're on with that, for sure.
What do you feel like are the biggest challenges or hurdles that you've had to overcome in your life in order to be successful or to get this far?
Maybe it's having very humble roots and not knowing that you should or shouldn't shoot at the moon. It was a big risk for me to step outside of the box in my life and follow my heart because the world's telling you that it's impossible and that it won't happen. There are a lot of naysayers along the path of success. And I think everyone who's successful has that story that you have to trust your gut and go for it. And sometimes you will not succeed, but often I think the more you're shooting for success, the more likely you are to land somewhere good. So that was a huge hurdle for me. I think was breaking out of the mindset of small town or small life and knowing that I could create something that didn't exist yet and live in that truth. It's also been a challenge at times being a female in the industry, being a female in the music industry. And I have friends that do, really run the gamut in the industry that are females, whether they're DJs or people who work on stages or entertainers, talent buyers. This industry has slowly changed over time, but it has been a major challenge and hurdle to make progress. And when I can stop on Women's Day and look around in the office at Insomniac and see how many women are creating the magic behind the scenes, I feel so proud.
Yeah, when I was thinking about you running Team Easy or just, being a performer, I was just thinking about the pain in the ass it was. I feel like women have a harder time getting paid. And I just remember as a young DJ, like, constantly chasing the promoter around the venue and being like, where's my money? And like people just being like, you're not the DJ. What are you doing in here? And all of those kind of things. And I can only imagine that like dance is the same, if not worse.
Yes, yes. Just as a woman to be taken seriously. And, as you're saying, even being a woman who's like in the spotlight or, I would say more like sexually confident, what you're a dancer and you're dancing in, not a lot of clothing, whatever it is, people will try to stereotype you into the idea of what they think you are or should be, put you in a little box and in your place constantly. And I'm a fighter and I've been fighting my way through this industry for a very long time. And I never gave up. I just never gave up. And I have always carried myself with professionalism and approached things with a business mind. And I think people were able to see that and that it was very different than what they had assumed. So I would say like being professional and persevering over all the years, I just kept working towards the goal and not being discouraged along the way or told that I should or shouldn't be a certain way, for sure.
What advice do you give out? Like maybe you have to give it less these days because people who are seasoned performers are performing for you. But what advice do you have for people on like a couple tricks, a couple tips if you have to get in front of people to like make your performance better?
Well, we actually have all levels of performers that work for us still. I like to recruit and train people. I'm not just looking for performers who are a pretty package already. We have a lot of them, but we also really span the whole gamut on that, I'd say. But I like to give these speeches before the performers go out at the events, and often I say to them things like, "Remember why you started. Remember why you're here. Think about the opportunity and the moment that you're in. Be in that moment. Connect to that truth in yourself, that energy, the passion. And that is probably the thing that builds the most confidence because it can really melt away doubt. And I think that to be a really good performer, you have to have that kind of confidence, the truth of passion in you versus you thinking that you're just faking your way through it. It's like, why you're here. And, you didn't come this far to only come this far. So let's go do it.
On that note, do you have any beauty tips or travel tips that you're loyal to? Like what are some things in your commandments?
Well, in the commandments of performers for beauty tips, everyone knows that having a neutral nail does not distract. So they hear me constantly say this, you can't be like a character that has like neon blue nails, like you can't be Alice in Wonderland and have hot pink nails. So I'm constantly pushing them to evolve into the beauty regimen that is their character. I don't know how much we can apply that to real life, but a neutral nail does not distract. For travel tips, I would just say that you should always do what the locals do. That for me is how I travel. Like I definitely want to see the culture, the city, the life, the lives that people live, the nightlife, whatever it is that's happening there. Eat the same food, learn about the history in each place. So I try to do that.
Yeah, me too. I think that was like one of my favorite parts of touring as a DJ has always just been getting to go to different countries and having people take me on wild adventures wherever it is that they want to go.
Yeah, it's the best when they take you to their favorite places.
I always think it's weird when people don't do that, but you always meet people who are touring DJs or performers and they're just like, I just want to go to Burger King and go back to my hotel. Like, why would you do this job?
To do that anywhere.
Like, why do you have this life?
Yeah. If we're gonna work in this crazy schedule and be on planes all the time and away from our loved ones and all the things we're doing, then you definitely have to see the world and get the most out of it while you're there.
Speaking of loved ones, you have been with Charlie from Dirty Phonics for quite a long time now, right?
8 years. Yeah.
8 years. How did you guys first meet? And also, I should say, like, it seems really lucky and like fortunate because you dating somebody that is an artist and is a DJ themselves. They know about this crazy lifestyle. So you guys don't have to like judge each other and like, why aren't you in bed? It's 8 a.m. or whatever.
Right.
How did you guys meet?
I'd say that's definitely something that makes it work, is understanding the crazy scheduling. We met because I was running the entertainment at EDC that was in Colorado at the time. It was there for a few years. And I was running the entertainment, and I really have always been in the drum and bass scene and known all of its key players. Most of them are, old friends of mine. And I remember when they first kind of turned up on the scene in America, and I didn't know who they were. So out of professionalism of always trying to introduce myself to people anyways, I caught their set. That was at the end of the night, and introduced myself to them. And they were so nice, and we just hit it off. And I told them that if they ever came back to Denver to hit me up, and I would show them the city. And they did. So we became really good friends, and that went on for a couple of years before Charlie asked me on a date, an official date. I thought he was just kidding, but he wasn't. And really, it kind of took that because I was so married to my work that it took a person kind of telling me, like, no, you're going to slow down and you're going to do this thing. So the best part of that story was that when I introduced myself to him, I was in full clown, and he said it was love at first sight.
Well, I mean, what's better than that?
That's the best part of that whole story, is that we met when I was in clown, and a couple of years later we went on a date, and we haven't been apart since.
And you even got him to dress up in clown makeup.
Yeah, he volunteered for that. I didn't have to work hard to get him to try it. He wanted to see what it felt like. So, little transformation there.
When you're dressed up as a clown, you have a clown character that you are, or do you have several clown characters that you?
No, I have one clown character. Yeah. Her name is Peasy. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. That's her full name. So yeah, she's been around a long time, and she's performed all over the world, and she's had a great career.
So is she a little bit of a highlighted part of your personality? Like, she acts different than Miss Easy does, right?
Oh yeah, yes. And that's kind of the thing about being a performer and being a character, is that I feel like even when I was posing as like that hot girl dancer, I was being a character. You're playing the role, and Peasy's character and personality is just so, being a clown is the most free thing you can do because there are no rules whatsoever. Like, you can do anything you want. And being in full clown is an amazing icebreaker. So if you are being completely ridiculous, and I love comedy and improv, so I can be completely ridiculous as Peasy, and people find it very entertaining and funny, and you can interact with people on that level. Whereas if I'm this regular human right now in my people clothes, it just doesn't come across the same. So, it enables you to, this extroverted part of yourself to really just be wild and out there and have zero rules and societal rules whatsoever.
Being a raver and working for EDC also, all of the different styles of music, which definitely helps when you're programming the performers and stuff to know, okay, like this is what trance music is going to be like. So this is what the dancing will be like. So this is what the costumes versus like this is a dubstep stage or whatever. But what is your personal favorite kind of music to dance to?
My heart definitely lies with breaks and drum and bass. Yeah, it's very hard to beat those two genres for me. I do love house music as well, and I do love techno. But I would say as a dancer, probably breaks and drum and bass. I used to teach dance classes to drum and bass. So I have definitely helped try to train the masses on how to dance to drum and bass.
Are any of those online, or can we get them back online, please?
There was a before time when we weren't really putting everything online. And there's a lot of stuff that is not online. I would say a lot of my career was not documented. And I'm not really sure if there's a video of that floating around at all anywhere.
What are some of okay, now you've been to like, I don't know how many thousands of raves and parties and clubs and festivals and rock concerts and whatever. What are some of the weirdest, wildest, or craziest things that you have ever witnessed at an event?
Events of any kind?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would say that I got booked for this event in the south of France I was performing with this team of fire performers in Paris, and they took the booking, but our communication was a little bit in broken English on the event, and I don't think we realized what we were signing up for. But we show up, and it turns out that we're at a Hells Angels rally, and our security were people who lived as reenactment Vikings. And there was this kind of like Ren fair going on inside of the Hells Angels rally. And turns out we opened for Motorhead.
Wow. That could have all gone very wrong, but you're here to tell the story. So
it was
I guess
probably
it was okay.
One of the coolest experiences ever. I was sleeping in a barn with horses and on stage with Lemmy. So it was definitely one of the wildest, coolest experiences ever for me. And it's that kind of willingness to just put myself out there that I think I really lived quite a life, quite a performance life, taking chances on taking some of the gigs that I've taken for sure. The same thing kind of happened when I got invited to perform in Japan. And there's a group of club kids in Tokyo that their scene is called Tokyo Decadence, and they threw these bizarre performance parties. And they invited me, and I didn't know what I was getting into, but I just showed up and did it. And some of the culturally strange things you see at a party in Tokyo and the alt scene is definitely on the list.
Okay, like what?
Okay, well, there was a performance piece that happened throughout the night where these girls were eating candle wax out of each other's mouths. So the entire performance was a very like something you definitely see on the internet. But the girls were, this is like live candle wax that they're pouring in each other's mouths and then like eating it out of each other's mouths. There was another piece that was happening at that time. There was a transgendered performer that was a knife thrower who was throwing knives at people on the boards that spin. And this is in the middle of a crazy nightclub where there's people like walking in the way. So, you see these like wild kind of out there. You don't expect to see this, like this person's throwing daggers at a person on a spinning board. The girls over there are like burning each other's mouths, eating it out of each other's mouths. Just the club kids alone in there were like pieces straight out of some sort of a fairy tale Tokyo dream. It's almost so surreal that there are not really words. it's like you have to see it. You would have to see it for sure. But some of the things that the way they look and the way they act and what they're doing is so bizarre and so normal to them. But yet they thought that I was extremely interesting because I, had giant pink hair and I was a tattooed, big-eyed Western performer, and I'm thinking I'm like the most boring thing in here, and they were all over it. So it's so strange, the whole culmination of all of the pieces of what makes up a Tokyo nightlife scene.
What do you feel like this whole lifestyle has taught you, and what meaning has it brought to your life?
It has taught me and a lot of us to be extremely open-minded, to live without judgment, to be accepting and open to possibilities of all kinds, and especially those in people. I would say that one of the things I've learned is to be in the moment, like live in the now, be fully present. And I am still blown away by my life often. And I love that I am wise enough to stop and appreciate and have gratitude in the moment for things. Whether I'm in that crazy nightclub in Tokyo, seeing things that are blowing my mind, or standing under the fireworks show at EDC for the 15th time, it doesn't matter. I have that moment where I am so grateful to just be right there.
What's some party advice or some life advice you would give to the young ravers out there?
I think after your question about the drugs in the scene, it would have been something along the lines of like, don't eat the purple acid. But my advice,
if you can find the purple acid.
Yeah, it's true. It probably doesn't exist anymore, huh? You can see that I'm out of that. I would say let it go. Be yourself. It's okay. It's like don't take yourself too seriously. Like, I am still laughing at myself every day. Like, I try not to ever take myself too seriously. And I think that giving yourself that option is really so important.
And what does your life look like right now? I mean, obviously the pandemic has kind of shuttered giant festivals and raves. And I know that Insomniac has been doing a lot of online live streams, which I presume you're also involved in. Actually, I saw you dancing as a really cute dancing card pretty recently.
Don't take yourself too seriously. I actually did that just to kind of like lighten the mood amongst the entertainers during this year. Like I wanted to make people laugh and really, like I said, put myself out there in a moment of just complete nonsense. And I think that was probably food for the soul for myself as well. So yes, we're definitely working on the live streams. I've been working on that, and I've been in some of them. And we're working on a project right now called Electric Mile. That's a drive-through event for Insomniac.
Yeah, I'm really happy I got to sit down with you, because it's like, backstage at a giant stage at a rave is not the time that you can ask people, all these questions when you're like getting a message on the walkie-talkie and having to run off, and like, there's all this madness going on. But I think, like, to me, all the people who make these events happen, like, are equally as important as the DJs or whoever you see, up on stage. Like, without all the work that you guys do, programming all the performers and all the beautiful costumes and thinking about all of these wild creative visions, a party like EDC wouldn't be what it is. So,
yeah, there are so many moving parts, and there's so many contributions that create the overall picture. So I think that it's great to celebrate that for sure. So, and yeah, you're right. It's very hard to get to know people in the industry unless you offer to tour them around your city, like I said I did with Charlie. Yeah, because it's so easy for those moments to escape you when you're running from thing to thing at the event and the music's loud. But I feel really charmed that I have met so many amazing people in the industry and forged so many amazing friendships that have lasted all this time.
Now there's many generations of people to like have a wild party with.
So many, yeah.
Well, Miss Easy, thank you so much for joining me here on Rave to the Grave.
And thanks for inviting me. It was so great to catch up with you.
You too. Rave to the Grave is recorded at the historic Newsstand Studios at Rockefeller Center in New York City. The show is hosted and produced by me, Vivian Host. Our engineer is superstar Joe Hazen. Our theme song, and all additional music in this episode, is by Star Eyes. You can listen to Rave to the Grave on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on this and other episodes, check us out on the web at ravetothegrave.org or follow us on Instagram at ravetothe.grave. Until next time, permission to party.